What if I told you that even ordinary people can be on top of the world?
The first attempt on the North Pole by a team of women gets underway today.
The epic adventure will take them over 1,000 kilometres of hazardous sea ice.
It's thousands of miles of ice and nobody.
And so I found myself walking into this water and then sinking up to my neck.
I honestly thought I was going to die in the Arctic.
The all-new 30 for 30 podcast. Subscribe now on the ESPN app or Apple Podcasts.
30 for 30 podcast is presented by Mini. We're finding the best sports stories for you right now. And to do that, we're behind the wheel of the new Mini Countryman, the biggest Mini yet.
Please proceed to the highlighted route.
To find great sports stories, you have to get out into the world and follow your instincts. That's where the new Mini Countryman's all-wheel drive comes in handy. With all four, we can chase down a story in the city, the country, and most places in between. No matter what story you're chasing, the new Mini Countryman will help you find it. It's available now, and so are 30 for 30 podcasts.
Toasty and warm in the studio with me all morning is our friend Booger McFarland, and Field Yates has made his way in as well. Field, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Massachusetts.
Okay, so to you, what is the demarcation of cold?
Yeah, I'm actually with you on this one. Sorry, Booger. I'm with Greeny here. Yeah, I'd say like 20 and under is cold to me. I mean, it's very chilly.
So what's 36 to you then?
Yeah, I thought that brisk was a fairly appropriate description.
Brisk?
Yeah.
When you can see your breath, that's past
Put it this
brisk.
way, like I can make it, like, you know, coming to work in the morning, if I forget to bring a coat on the way out, like I can survive. I can make it from the car to the office door and walk around campus, even if there's some outdoor walks in 36-degree weather.
What a tough guy you are. I mean,
survive. He said he could survive.
I'm sure the TV audience is thinking to themselves, "Yeah, that's exactly what comes to mind."
People from this who grew up either in the South as you did, or in Southern California, or in Phoenix, or whatever the case may be, where it's always warm. Like they just have a totally different perspective on life.
Sure.
And neither one is right or wrong. I guess everything is about what you're accustomed to. Like Bill tweets, I'm with Greeny. 36 and sunny is practically T-shirt weather. Single digits is when it's cold, especially with wind chill. Yeah, to me, 36, if the sun is outside, is golf weather. I've definitely played golf in 36 degrees and sunny.
No, 50. If there's a 5 in it, I'll play golf. If there's no 5 in the beginning of the number, I'm not playing.
You're done?
Greeny, I didn't own a coat until I started working here 4 years ago. Like, I didn't own any jacket whatsoever. My wife said, are you going to get a jacket? I was like, for what? It's like 70 and balmy in Florida. She's like, no, you know you're going to Bristol. I said, yeah, it gets a little chilly up there. She said, you have no idea.
The one cold day that Tampa had probably the entire year was the day we were supposed to play Old Memorial last year on a Sunday. It was an NFL playoff
like
weekend.
29 degrees.
It was freezing. But guess who played golf that day?
Yeah, you did.
And guess who didn't?
Me.
Exactly. Okay, Field Yates is with us in our studio. Jets-Bills last night. Bit of a surprising finish for a lot of people around the country, I would guess. Let's start with the Jets side of it. It's obviously a team that I follow closely.
Sure.
They've had a startlingly good year. And if you assess where they are right now, they only have a couple of guys who are over 30, but two of them were part of their best players last night, in Josh McCown and Matt Forte. But they have a lot of youth. They have a lot of cap space. They still have a big quarterback question to answer going forward. How would you, as one who assesses teams' personnel overall, assess where the Jets sit in the overall scheme of things?
Well, first of all, at the risk of hyperbole, is Todd Bowles the coach of the year? They're 4-5 in a team that many ticketed to win 4 fewer games than that all season, much less before their bye week in Week 11. Todd Bowles and his staff have done just an incredible job, because when I sit there and look at the personnel on this roster, Greeny and Booger, I still see a lot of holes. I still don't see a bunch of foundational blue-chip players that I can say with conviction are going to be on this roster for the next 5 to 10 years if all goes right. They've got 2 fantastic safeties in Marcus May and obviously Jamal Adams as well. But the quarterback, Josh McCown, has been super steady. He's not their long-term answer. Josh himself knows that. The offensive line played much better last night than it has throughout much of this season. The running backs, though, they still have a sprinkling of players that probably won't be there once the Jets make, that next step into a team that can consistently contend. So that brings me back to the coaching, that this team has been extremely well coached by John Morton, the new offensive coordinator, Todd Bowles and his staff. I think there has to go off. He won't win the award if they only win 6 or 7 games because we always give it to a coach that wins 10 or more games. But I don't think we can look past the job that the staff of the New York Jets has done to get these players in a position to compete. And I give them a lot of credit because they could have probably just mailed it in this year and said, 3-4 wins, that's fine. No big deal, right? Like, no one's going to look at us any differently. We were supposed to be this bad. And here they are competing every single Sunday. Before last night, they had lost 3 straight games by 7 points or fewer. This team's been legit.
I definitely agree with you on that point as far as Todd Bowles. Let me ask you a question. Is there any doubt that they're going to take a quarterback in the first round?
I think it depends on where they fall. Because all of a sudden, I don't have the updated draft order handy after last night, but I'd imagine they're somewhere outside of the top 10 now. And you combine that with...
They're definitely outside the top 10 right now, yeah.
Speculation, I think we can call it, that some of the top prospects aren't shoo-ins to declare, right? Sam Darnold seems to be the one that most people don't know with 100% certainty if he will declare for the 2018 NFL Draft. And the fact that a guy like Darnold has been just below average compared to the own standard he set for himself for USC this season. And I would think that the Jets would be looking long and hard at a rookie quarterback or a quarterback that could become available in free agency like a Kirk Cousins. But it's no certainty at this point just because of how well they're playing.
To your point, Field, the Jets last night became the first team to surpass their over-under win total that Westgate set in Vegas before the season began. Westgate set the Jet over-under at 3.5. I'm not going to lie to you. I would have lost a lot of money. I think I would have bet the under. And they're 4-5, and as you just pointed out, they easily could have won each of their last 3 games that they lost, and maybe should have won 2 of the 3. That said, you just made me think about this, so I jotted it down. If we're going to judge Coach of the Year on teams that have just done more than we were expecting, these are just the names I wrote down.
Yep.
Doug Peterson, Mike Zimmer, Todd Bowles, Sean McDermott, Sean McVay, and Sean Payton. That's we got to run on Sean's there. Yeah. That seems to be the hot name right now for NFL coaches. Yeah. Those seem to be the guys. I just quickly popped up the standings. Maybe I'm missing somebody.
The only name that I would add, and not because
Andy Reid.
Andy Reid.
Yeah.
That just not because the Chiefs we thought were going to be bad, but to lose Eric Berry in Week 1.
Yeah.
You cut Jerry Maclin, like the wizardry on offense that they have run this year has just been terrific. I am a huge fan of what Andy Reid has done in Kansas City, but that's a great list otherwise. And Todd Bowles belongs in that conversation, even though they have a losing record.
I actually agree with that. Yeah. You agree with that, Booger?
No, I do.
I actually do. Yeah. I got to give the guy a lot of credit. And going into the season, I thought he was dead man walking. I didn't think that they wanted him around, and I understood why. And there are still a few in-game things he does that drive me crazy as a fan. But in the final analysis, I agree with you. If you were going to judge a coach on what his team's record is relative to its overall level of talent, I think he has done an excellent job. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Progressive celebrating 5 years and more than 500 cars donated to vets. To learn more, you can visit keystoprogress.com. And Stanzik is typing up, if you agree it's a coach-quarterback league, the Jets are halfway there. Where are the Bills? They were 5-2 going into last night. Everyone is going to point it out that the last 2 times they were 5-2, they played the Jets in their 8th game and lost and wound up under 500. I kind of believe in this team. I think it was just a bad night. These Thursday night games, especially for the road team, while the road teams have won a lot this year, it still is a little bit of an outlier. I still kind of buy Buffalo this year. Do you?
Yeah, I do. And listen, last night was a flattening performance for them, and the schedule is difficult coming up for Buffalo. I believe
it's brutal.
It's New Orleans next. I think Chargers after that, and then maybe the Patriots.
Kansas City. Here's what they have coming up.
Yeah,
they have home New Orleans.
Yep.
At Chargers, which is a home game. At Kansas City, home New England.
Right.
So that's a pretty tough stretch there, the next 4 games.
The next 4 weeks of their season could define whether they actually make that playoff push or whether they sort of hover back around 500 this season. But I'm still believing. And I think Sean McDermott has proven to a lot of people what kind of head coach he is and is going to be in the NFL. You hear his players talking about him, and I get it. Sometimes players say things to the media that are just sort of, vanilla and safe. But these guys have bought all into Sean McDermott. I thought that Mina Kimes' piece that was on ESPN.com and in the ESPN the magazine yesterday about Tyrod Taylor, that essentially said your perception of him might be a Rorschach test as to what you think about what a quarterback should be at the NFL level. I'm a Tyrod Taylor believer.
Yeah,
I think he's underappreciated, and I get it. Last night, you're the quarterback and you lose to a bad team. A lot of fingers get pointed back at you. But if we think this is a coach and quarterback league, which I agree with to a strong extent, Buffalo's on the right track. If I told you before the season they'd be 5-3 halfway through the year, you'd say, all right, like that's job well done by those two by that coach and that player. So yes, last night was bad. It's not going to get any easier, but I'm in on Buffalo.
I'm sorry. I heard people talking about that piece yesterday. I haven't seen it yet. Mina's piece. Give me a thumbnail on that. What does that mean? That Tyrod Taylor is a Rorschach test for your view of the quarterback position?
So basically the idea is like some people look at Tyrod Taylor and they see a limited player who can, never take you to the next level. Some people look at it and say like this is a player who was a backup quarterback who became hit free agency, signed a modest deal, and then gets a subsequent large deal for the Buffalo Bills. And does he fit into the contract of what a normal franchise quarterback is? He's a quarterback that can throw the football, also known for more mobility, design runs and non-design runs. So it's a worthwhile read, and Tyrod Taylor is in some ways a hot-button player.
Yeah.
But they're 5-3, and he's been a big part of it.
Assess him for me, Booger. What is your assessment? What do you see when you look at that Rorschach test?
He's limited when it comes to being able to put the game on his back and say, Tyrod Taylor, win the game. We're going to allow you to throw it 40 to 50 times. I think the numbers bear that out. When he throws it more than 35 times, the Bills are not a very good football team. When he throws it less than that, I think they're like 5-1 this year. So if you look at him, Greeny, what he is, he's the new age quarterback, a guy that's limited in the passing game, but he brings athletic ability to the table. He can manufacture first downs on his own. Is he good enough to win? Absolutely. Are you ever going to put him in the top 10 quarterbacks in the league? No. But can you win a Super Bowl with Tyrod Taylor surrounded by the right supporting cast? Absolutely. And I think that's what the vast majority of teams in the National Football League are going to have. You're not going to have Brady, Breeze, Manning. Everybody's not going to have that, or Rodgers. You're going to have to win with a guy who is a little bit above average, that you surround him with great talent, which brings me to one of the two quarterbacks that basically their season ended yesterday, in Andrew Luck. To me, people are going to talk about this injury and say, yeah, they may need to go draft another guy and you kind of prepare. Here's the way I look at the Andrew Luck deal. This is self-induced by the coach. Okay, because of what they surrounded him with, the lack of offensive line dollars. They're 28th in the NFL with cap money devoted to the offensive line. Yep. Andrew Luck is one of the most hit quarterbacks in the National Football League since he's come in. So how much of the blame do you put on the coach organization? I know Ryan Grigson is no longer there, right, but on this organization for where this young player is now.
Right, it's almost like a tale of two regimes, right? Because you can look at what has happened since Chris Ballard was hired as our GM this offseason, and I could say to you, like, I'm not sure what he could have done within his power to help Andrew Luck get back on the field, right? Andrew Luck was already hurt by the time that Chris Ballard took over as the GM. I think the question that a lot of people are asking is probably this, is why is it that this injury, which occurred in 2015, did not result in surgery until the offseason of 2017, or the offseason 2016 leading into 2017. Specific, though, to the roster, which is going to be in the hands of Chris Ballard, there's always an emphasis on protecting your quarterback, and there is, as we talk about frequently in any NFL programming, there is a lack of quality offensive linemen. But the impetus for Chris Ballard to draft or develop or spend big in free agency on offensive linemen probably just magnified and grew when we got this news yesterday, because Andrew Luck is the most important piece of this franchise. Without him, they have 2 wins against the 2 teams in the NFL that are winless, the Browns and the 49ers. Otherwise, like they are one notch above the Browns and 49ers for perspective on how bad this team has been this year. With him, they're a team that, if you had Andrew Luck on this roster right now, you might say, given the other news in the AFC South yesterday related to a quarterback, they might be the team to beat in this division. He is just that valuable to this roster. I don't think there's many silver linings in losing. I think the Jets are a good testament. Like, people are like, yeah, they should just lose. Well, it's hard to tell 53 grown men to just lose every Sunday or every Thursday night. But I do believe that the silver lining, if there is one, is that Indianapolis is now tumbling towards 3rd, 4th, 5th overall pick in the draft. And if there's a surefire, terrific offensive lineman, might be theirs for the taking. Or Saquon Barkley, or somebody else that could infuse some talent to that offense. All of a sudden, they're right there.
They just don't seem like a very physical team to me, Green. Like over the last couple of years when you watch the Colts, and we kind of had that stigma when I played there. It was like basketball on grass with Peyton Manning, which is one of the reasons why Tony traded for me, to try to bring some physicality there and help the run defense out. But over the last couple of years, they don't seem physical offensively or defensively on the line of scrimmage, and it shows a lot. And to me, like, that's their biggest issue.
Yeah, they can't get any push up front. And Frank Gore, we all have incredible reverence for Frank Gore. might go into the Hall of Fame one day. But they have no explosive plays in the running game right now. Marlon Mack, who they drafted out of South Florida this year, has given them some of that of late. But it's hard to watch the Colts on offense, right? Like Jacoby Brissett, obviously it was baptism by fire for him. You get traded on Labor Day weekend, and you're the starter by week 2. But the offensive line is bad. They don't scare you. And that's the one thing that I thought the Jets did last night, to just sort of use a recent example. Like, they imposed their will against the Bills last night. They controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. That's why you run for 200 yards. And everything else can look a lot different. Like, your quarterback play can look a lot different. Your secondary can look a lot different. If the 5 guys up front on offense and the 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 guys up front on defense are winning their battles consistently.
Mike, let's get some Straight Talk here, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. A very interesting thing happened this week, and it got very little attention because it happened on a winless team. Myles Garrett is the number 1 pick in this year's draft. And the questions that came up about Garrett when we were going through the draft process, and you had some of them, Booger, as much as absolutely anyone.
Yes.
And this is a phrase that people in the sport love to use. Does he love football? Yeah. And what does that really mean? What it really means is he willing to give up absolutely everything to play it? So Myles Garrett this week self-diagnosed a concussion. He self-reported a concussion. And I'm fascinated to see what the overall reaction is going to be to that around the league, because the reaction should be good for him. Good for him. This is the one issue that we cannot have in football. Right. Young football players should learn from that. If you're a high school football player, you should learn from that. This guy's the number 1 pick in the draft, right, and he felt like he had a concussion, and he self-reported it. But I guarantee you that in offices around the league, there are guys going, see, that's why I didn't buy into him. I want my players, and I'm quoting Brian Urlacher on our show right now, but we know there are a million others who said, I would hide that with everything I had. I would make sure no one knew I had a concussion. I would do everything I could to try and hide the fact that I had a concussion so I can get out there and play on Sunday. And so I think that is an interesting litmus test. A, the players who would versus wouldn't self-report a concussion in 2017, and B, the reaction that people have to it. Booger, your thoughts?
Greeny, I think there's going to be a line, and there is a public perception and a private perception. The public perception is going to be just what you said. Great for Myles Garrett. This is what you should do. This is what we want our players to do. Yep. But when you close that door in the locker room, a lot of players are going to look at him and say, you soft. You're really soft. You know why? Because how many times do you think I've gone on the field with my bell a little rung? How many times have you think I've gone on the field with my faculties not really all there? But now here you are, the number 1 pick. We've guaranteed you $30+ million, and now you're going to self-report a concussion when we're trying to battle from this hole we're in? That's going to be the private perception inside the locker room, and not a lot of people are going to be willing to say it publicly because they'll get ridiculed by the people that are going to say, yeah, but it's your head, it's your brain. That's most important, and I think that's the difference that we're going to see. Publicly, everybody's going to say the right thing. But when that door closes in that locker room, there are a lot of guys that play with broken bones, that play with pain, that play with so many different things, bleeding. And here's this guy he's going to go tell the doctors, you know what? I don't really feel good today. My bell's kind of wrong. Well, you know what? Guess what? My bell was wrong a lot. And maybe I was wrong for playing through that. I've seen several guys on my team play through that, and I've never seen a guy self-report it. Is it the right thing to do? Absolutely. Is it the wrong thing perceptionally in the locker room? Absolutely also.
If I'm not mistaken, one of his comments was something about, children in his future one day and, wanting to make sure that he was there for them. And
it sounds like Derrick Rose almost.
Which is exactly where I was going to go.
Exactly. Remember
and that was if I'm not mistaken, that may have been one of the turning points in the Derrick Rose Chicago Bulls era. Derrick Rose, obviously the former MVP, and there was a time where people thought they might have a statue next to Jordan for Derrick Rose if things went as they had hoped for in Chicago, as you know better than anybody, Greeny. And all of a sudden, now that's a point. That is a quote that Derrick Rose will never be able to detach himself from in the mind of some Bulls fans, is that he was thinking about his young son based off of his knee injury, where you should be thinking about getting back out there and, dribble drive and kicking out to whoever the Bills or whoever his Bulls teammates were. And for Myles Garrett, maybe this goes somewhat unnoticed because the Browns have so many other almost comical storylines surrounding them, not the least of which is that A.J. McCarron trade that was
not.
Oh,
my God, yeah.
Yes. But, I mean, that people need to go back and watch the video of Schefter on your show yesterday or whatever. Yeah, yesterday morning.
It was yesterday.
Wow. But I think Booger has pinned the tail on the donkey here, right? Like, we should applaud him for what he's doing. We, on the outside, have every right to applaud him and should applaud him for what he is doing. I also think that one of the realities, there may be some guys on that team that are saying, like, you know something? Not sure I would have done that myself.
A lot of guys on that team also might be saying it, and if Mike Golic was sitting here, I know he'd be saying it, that I don't have the luxury of doing that.
Yes.
Because he's the number one pick in the draft. When he feels okay, he's getting right back on that field.
Right.
If Mike Golic had self-reported a concussion during his career as a 10th-round draft pick who was fighting just to stay on the field, he might never get back on the field.
He'd be cut, probably.
He might get cut.
Yeah.
See, and that's the thing. So you've got a whole bunch of different people whose perspective on this needs to change if we're really going to attack this problem. We either have this could be a line of demarcation here, guys. We have to decide: do we really care about head injuries in football or not? Do we or do we not? Because if we do, then if there is a price to be paid for self-reporting a concussion, if the price to be paid for self-reporting concussion is the general manager and the people who run the front office and everyone else saying, you know what, that guy's not tough enough, that's not the guy we want on our team, get rid of him, then no one's going to do it.
Right.
And what it means is that we're really not taking this seriously. We're saying we take it seriously.
Right.
We're making the quote-unquote politically correct statement about head injuries, but we don't really care. Myles Garrett can do anything. He's got a huge guaranteed contract. He's the number one pick in the draft. He runs no risk of not getting an opportunity when he comes back. What has to change, if we're really going to change the way this works, is that same zero risk has to apply to every player in the locker room.
But it doesn't, though, Greeny, because every player in the locker room, like if every player, let's say guy 52, okay, who's a special teams guy,
right.
He's a foot soldier, okay, let's say he has a concussion, he self-reports. Let's say he's out 2 weeks. Guess what? That's 2 weeks of a roster spot that's taken up by a guy that, you know what, is really interchangeable.
True.
So every player's not afforded the luxury of a Myles Garrett that's been the number one overall pick and guaranteed $30+ million. So it's never going to be equal when it comes to that. Some guys are just going to have to suck it up. And Golic would tell you, when you're a foot soldier, you have to do things that the number one picks just can't do. You have to do things that the number one picks don't have to. And so you have to understand that the football mentality, most of the coaches in the National Football League are not millennials. They're of the old school mentality. The guy that I played for, Rob Marinelli, he would tell you, listen, hamstring on a nose guard, not acceptable. Otherwise, play through it. There are things you have to play through, especially as a defensive lineman. We're the tough guys on the field. We're the physical guys. And no matter how you look at it, there are guys in that locker room. There are guys on the Browns coaching staff. They're going to call this young man soft. They'll never say it publicly, but privately, I guarantee they're going to say it.
Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Yes, the same people who couldn't get the information about their trade for A.J. McCarron into the league in time will be describing how Myles Garrett got this one wrong. Field, final word.
I can't get over that story. And what's crazy to think about the Browns and Bengals trade that was or was not is that, like, we may not know all the information yet. Like, there might be more layers to this that have come out. But like, I also think that if part of the spin is that, like, emails couldn't be, like, coordinated, like, if the idea there is to say that so that people in the public sort of buys it, and it's like, oh, now I get why this trade couldn't have gone through. Come on. You expect me to buy that the reason why this trade couldn't go through was simply because a couple of emails got crossed?
Because the Wi-Fi didn't work all of a sudden?
Come on, as someone has pointed out many times, like, the Browns front office is made up of, like, Sashi Brown, who the football czar there. He was a Harvard law guy. Come on. I don't buy, like, to me, something smells very funny. And I think people should go back and watch Schefter's video again from this show yesterday morning. Listen to it, watch it. It's a bizarre story.
We'll play that. You know what? You make a good point. We should play that back again, and we will, coming up later here this morning. Field Yates, we will see you later as well. The podcast, give me the podcast information.
Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. We're going to preview every single game today.
All right, very good. Make sure you hear that today and every weekday.
Computer, execute 12.4p operation.
Optimizing algorithm. Running encryption packet alpha. Night. Oh, I don't feel so good.
What is it, computer?
Is it hot in here? It feels hot in here. I feel a little clammy. I should lie down or something.
A computer with a virus? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
Those oysters Rockefeller were a mistake.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Mike and Mike, Booger McFarland is in for Golick today. Let's bring John Granato into the conversation here for a quick moment. He is a talk show host on ESPN 97.5 in Houston, does the shows that follow ours here every single day. And this has been such a remarkable period of time in the city of Houston, and we wanted to get a few thoughts on it. John, good morning. How are you today?
Great. How are you guys?
Good.
Well, we're great. And I'd love you to try and put into some perspective for our audience the way people are feeling. 2 months ago, your city was underwater. It was one of the worst natural disasters that this nation has ever seen. The baseball team was literally displaced playing some home games in other cities. And now here they are 2 months later winning a World Series championship. How would you put into words what you are hearing from your callers and those of the Houston area, what this means to the city?
Well, it's been wonderful. Taking your mind, it's a lot of places here. It still looks like a war zone, and the cleanup is still and not even close to getting back fully yet. The callers yesterday were so emotional. We had more than a few guys said I cried. This is something that we've been up and down, and that whole series was so up and down, and had so many emotional swings. And that's how our city has been. And for this to happen, and so many stories on the news about, I lost my house, but this is making it so much better. It's taking my mind off of it. And the euphoria of this baseball team doing what they did really has been wonderful, wonderful for the city. I think it was destiny. I really do. I think that this city deserved this. Is finally here. We're a city of champions again. It's been 22 years since we've had anything to cheer about like this, so it couldn't have come at a better time.
John, with that being said, how realistic did you guys think that this was, going back to the SI cover in the summer of 2014 that basically said in 2017 the Astros will be world champions? How realistic did you guys think this was, going all the way back to 2014?
Well, it was pretty funny at the time, if you want to know the truth. That was, 300 lost teams, and to make that kind of claim. They were doing some great things. Jeff Luhnow, they had a plan in place. They had to rebuild the entire minor league system. They lost all of those games. I wouldn't say they tanked. They just weren't good enough to win. They were just terrible. So for them to be getting all those high draft picks, then they had to turn them around. They did make the mistake in Mark Appel instead of Chris Bryant. But when you get Carlos Correa and you get Bregman and, you put it together the way that Jeff Luhnow did, we started to see in 15 they made the playoffs, and it was just too early for them to win yet. They weren't ready yet. They had that 8th inning in the Game 4 against Kansas City. And then last year they had, the hiccups against the Rangers. If not for the Rangers, they would have been in the playoffs. But to do this, and then when you looked at midseason and how disappointed they were at the trade deadline, and they just tanked. And then all of a sudden, Justin Verlander, it just changed everything here. It's amazing that one guy in a base, you can see that in basketball and even in football with the quarterback. But when Justin Verlander got here, it just changed the entire attitude, not only of this team, of this city. It changed baseball when Verlander got here. So it was just that one acquisition that they needed at the end to put him over the top, and he did it.
We'll have A.J. Hinch, the manager of the Astros, just after 9 Eastern time, so just after 8 in Houston today, as you guys get set to celebrate that. And no city has ever, as we point out, more deserved to have a fun celebration than the city of Houston does right now. And then, of course, you guys, in the middle of the day yesterday, get this news about Deshaun Watson. What was the reaction to that? Because I must admit, when I saw it myself, and I'm sitting here 1,000 miles away without really an emotional stake in it particularly, I was stunned. What was the reaction in Houston to the injury to this kid who has just been so electric?
Why can't we have anything nice around here? That was pretty much it. What the heck? How does that happen? One day so high, and then the next day so low. That guy changed. Even without JJ and Whitney Merciless, this team should be 5-2 right now. If not for Bill O'Brien, running up the middle 3 times against Seattle and running up the middle 3 times against New England. This team could easily be 5-2 and actually be in the talk, in the hunt without those guys defensively. Probably not ready to win just yet like the Astros weren't a couple of years ago, but man, are the pieces in place. And man, is Bill O'Brien a different guy too. The interesting question about this now is, you saw Bill O'Brien, his offense was so staid and boring over the last couple of years. Of course, he had Brock Osweiler and Brian Hoyer and all of that stuff. but there was no ingenuity, no originality. Now, all of a sudden, he seems to have been rejuvenated, but he's only got a couple of years left on the contract. How do you judge Bill O'Brien after this was the year that he had to have to stay here or to move on to get a job maybe that he wanted where he'd have more autonomy? But how do you judge him now with the Deshaun Watson and the way that they were playing, even though they were just 3-4, they looked wonderful? Or do you judge him by what is going to come now in these next 9 games when he's going to have Tom Savage or whomever, whatever is going to happen here, and no defense? How do you judge whether or not you keep that guy going forward? I think that's a really interesting thing, too. We all think that Deshaun Watson is going to come back. I mean, I can't believe anything else because he's did so wonderful for the city to finally have a quarterback, have it 17 years and 16 years and finally have a quarterback in this city. But the question is going to be who's going to be that guy leading them going forward.
I guess we'll have to wait a little bit and find out. But John, listen, on the bigger picture topic, again, enjoy the celebration today. I'm thrilled for your city. We're all thrilled for the city. So enjoy the parade today. Enjoy the championship, and we'll check in again soon. Well done today. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
John Granato, again, ESPN 97.5 in Houston on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold. Tragedy comes in a variety of different shapes and sizes and colors. I remember so vividly how significant the World Series felt in New York after September 11th. And I'm not in any way comparing September 11th to the hurricane, except that when you have a tragedy in a city, you have a tragedy in a city. And you've got people who are binding together and doing things, and you need something that is fun and exciting that people can come together about that isn't that. That gives you something else to talk about. If I were to put my finger on what the healing power, to whatever degree it was, of the Yankee playoff run that year it was that when people came together, it was sometimes to talk about something else. Yeah. It wasn't just to talk about what had happened. And there is enormous value in that, in just talking about something else. And so, again, for the Astros to make this run at this time, I remember talking to A.J. Hinch, they were in Tampa, right? They were playing home games in Tampa because they couldn't play in Houston. And here they are 2 months later, and they're having a parade today through the streets. I think it's terrific.
Green, to your point, it changes the focus. Because when we have tragedy, that's all we focus on. And then sports happen, and now it changes our focus from the tragedy to something that we can all smile about, something that we can all galvanize our lives around. And I love what the Astros have done. But more importantly, to me, the Houston Texans have kind of been snake bit. If you look at their top players, Brian Cushing has been hurt. J.J. Watt has been hurt. Whitney Merciless has been hurt. Jadeveon Clowney has been hurt. Now Deshaun Watson is hurt. Like, all their top players at some point get hurt. And to John's point, how do you judge the head coach when all your top players are hurt? How do you judge Mike McCarthy now that Aaron Rodgers is hurt? And I'm not comparing Deshaun Watson to Aaron Rodgers, but when you have top players, you're counting on those players to play and make plays. So I think it's going to be a very, very tough job to judge Bill O'Brien, especially when 5 or 6 of his top players are consistently hurt.
I think he's a guy that if he does get out of there, and all the stories last year was that he wanted out, I think he'd get another job fast.
I think he's a good coach.
There are teams out there that look, he's gotten himself into the playoffs multiple times with like 5 different quarterbacks a season. He's like rotating quarterbacks around like they're the Browns, except they're not winless. He gets in the playoffs every year, albeit in a generally a bad division. So yeah, I do. And they've been, it's you look at them and it's hard to believe they're under 500. It feels like they've had a sensational season. Now I think it is gone. We'll have the manager of the Astros a little later live this morning. Plus Tim Tebow and Joey Galloway and Stu Gatz all on the way. Stay with us. A Football Friday with Mike and Mike. The topic we had a little earlier about Myles Garrett is a really important one. If you're just joining us, Myles Garrett, number 1 pick in the draft, self-reporting a concussion. And again, I applaud him for it, but while fully recognizing that one of the reasons he can do it is that when he comes back, he's going to get right back on the field. He's the first pick in the draft, and there are tons of players in his locker room and locker rooms all around the league that if they give up their spot for any reason, inclusive of this one, they may never get it back. And that's one of the reasons they'd hide it. But there are also guys who could be in the position that he's in, who would still hide it. Brian Urlacher, I'll never forget, told us, remember where we were sitting. We were on the set at the Super Bowl. And he was sitting there and he said, this is right when this topic started becoming a big deal. And he said, man, I would hide it. I would hide it from everybody. I wouldn't tell a soul. I would do everything I could not to let anyone know that my head hurt or that my bell was rung, because it would mean that they would take me off the field. And that's the mentality that a lot of football people want football players to have. And therein lies the dichotomy, because that is exactly the wrong perspective for football players to have if we want to make any dent in the serious problem we have with brain injury.
Greeny, you know what doesn't last? Guys who make a lot of money, they get hurt. Okay? I'm a living example of that. All right? I was making a lot of money in the NFL. Tore my tricep, missed 8 games one year, missed a couple of other games because of an ankle. And lo and behold, when I hurt my knee in Indianapolis, you know what? Yeah, his career is probably over. Bill Polian called me one day, and I'm on the 15th hole on a par 5, and he cuts me. And I never played again. I came back, and I was
played golf again, just to be clear. Just the way you said that, it made it sound like you never – I was on the 15th hole of par 5, and I never played again. You played a lot of golf.
Yeah, I did. As a matter of fact, I finished that round of golf after I got cut. You can't make – money. You can't make a living in the National Football League if you're not on the field. Players realize that. That's not going to change. You know what doesn't last is guys that get hurt. And people who have the perception that you're going to be soft, you're not going to fight through injury. Like, one of the things that you talk about in negotiating with another team or with teams about a contract is, and my agent told me this, we talked about availability, how physically tough he'll fight through injuries. Those are things that come up in contract negotiations.
Of course.
And so players have to understand that, and players do know that.
And these are the things, these were the conversations they were having about Myles Garrett before the draft.
Yeah.
These were the whispers. It wasn't about watching him on tape. Now, taking plays off and all that was something that people talked about. But the other thing that I heard all over the place was, well, does he love football? He's fascinated by dinosaurs. Does he love football? This has nothing to do with the dinosaurs. But if he's going to walk in there and say, my head doesn't feel right, which everyone should be encouraged to do. And if you were a high school football player listening to this conversation right now, you should do that too.
Correct.
Because it is not worth going out there and playing if you have you just said it earlier, but not the whole country is with us at different times of the show. You said a minute ago that injuries are part of football. They're always going to be. We have to accept that. Yep. Yes, we do. And you're going to leave parts of yourself on that football field. That's correct. If you're going to play football long enough, you're going to leave parts of yourself. Mm-hmm. And Mike Golick can't lift his hand up over the top of his head. Yeah. And if you've ever watched Joe Namath or Mike Ditka try to walk, sometimes it's physically painful to watch. So you're going to, and those are the risks you guys take.
Yeah.
But this brain stuff is not something that you sign up for. And if one of the things that we can do to try to combat it, maybe we can never eliminate it from the game. Mm-hmm. But if you know you have a concussion, if you take yourself out or if you don't play with a concussion, that's got to help. It just has to. I'm not a doctor, but it has to make a difference. It just has to. And I think that has to be the new normal for pro football, one way or the other. I don't know how we get there, but they have to get there.
Well, I'll tell you how you get there. You have to change the old guard. And by the old guard, I mean the old coaches that have been around 30 or 40 years that when you diagnose a concussion by saying, hey, how many fingers do I have up? Okay, you're good. Get back in there.
Right.
Those days are gone, but the old guard is still in there. Like, you have to change the coaches and the people and the culture. The millennials have to become coaches. The young coaches, like a Sean McDermott, like a Sean McVay. You have to change those guys to have them aware of it. And so until that changes, it's not going to change.
All right. Don't forget, we got college football action tomorrow. At Auburn taking on Texas A&M. That's presented by Goodyear. The coverage starts 11:30 a.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com, and on the ESPN app. We are presented by Progressive Insurance, and a great guest list still to come this morning on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, including Stu Gatz and Joey Galloway and Tim Tebow and A.J. Hinch, the manager of the World Series champion Houston Astros. But while we have a moment here, I wanted to wish a very hearty good luck to our colleague Dan Stanzik, otherwise known as Stan Zick.
Yes.
Because for the first several years that he worked here, I thought his name was Stan Zick. I thought his last name was just Zick, because people always just described him as Stanzik.
Did you not talk to him and find this out?
Evidently not.
Oh.
And so I honestly, I mean, this is years. How long are you working here, Stanzik? How long have you been at ESPN? How long have you been working here? Just say it. I mean, you could just say it out loud. Why are you typing it up? December of 2008. So that's 9 years. And on our show, how long?
He could say it again. But
August of 15. Boy, you're getting very specific here. I don't need, like, dates. All right, so something like 2 years. For the longest time, I thought his name was Stan Zick. Well, one way or another.
Yeah.
He is running the New York Marathon Sunday. Mm-hmm. So good for him. He's run one marathon in his life before. And he said that his goal is to run this in 3.5 hours.
He said 3:30, and I thought that was the time it started. So like I had no clue he was talking about 3 hours and 30 minutes. Greeny, it would take me all day.
Well, listen, it wouldn't. I mean, it would take me the rest of my life. I'm not doing it. So I have zero interest in doing it. I'm not doing it.
Don't you want to push yourself physically at some point?
I wrote an entire book so as not to have to run a marathon. I'll tell you that story.
You avoided the question. Do you ever want to push yourself physically in anything?
Yes.
How?
Not that way. I can tell you right now. I can think of any number of ways that I would like to push myself physically that do not involve running 26.2 miles. But we do wish Stanzik very good luck. And I'll tell you, 3.5 hours is flying. So let's see how he does it. It might be the snooze. We'll be right back.